Jason was a boy who strolled through the city like it was his territory. His father was one of the respected officers in the city, and because of that, Jason was invincible. He strutted past other officers with his head held high so everybody would see how powerful he was. Jason would insult them right in front of others, say they were weak and tease about their mistakes. He often boasted, "What are you going to do about it? My dad runs this town." He had no limits in terms of arrogance and was actually thinking he was above retribution, believing his dad's rank would forever cover his wrongdoings. Jason did know this power was never his, but rather borrowed from the reputation of his father. When will Jason's arrogance finally be able to catch up with him? As time passed, Jason's behavior began to raise alarms. The officers he insulted started talking behind his back. At first, they would laugh off his insults or pretend they didn't care, but soon the whispers turned into gossip, and the gossip turned into open criticism. Jason's arrogance was no longer just a minor annoyance. It was becoming a problem, and that's when Officer Parker began to notice. He heard the whispers, saw the uneasy glances from his fellow officers, and for the first time, he wasn't proud of his son. But Officer Parker didn't say anything. He didn't confront Jason about it or punish him. He just sat there, quietly observing the tension that was building. Jason, as clueless as ever, took his father's silence as a sign that everything was okay. But something seemed amiss with Officer Parker keeping himself aloof. Why wasn't he intervening? Why was Officer Parker silent? Is he with the rest, or has he planned something? One afternoon, Jason's arrogance proved to be one of his deadliest mistakes. He was walking with his friends when he saw Officer Daniels, one of the officers he previously insulted. This time, however, Jason didn't just make snide comments or jokes. He went further. He loudly mocked Officer Daniels as weak, saying that he didn't deserve to wear a badge. The crowd around them remained silent. Officer Daniels stood there, his face red with anger, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he locked eyes with Jason, a cold, intense stare that sent a chill down Jason's spine. At that moment, Jason realized the officer wasn't going to back down. There was something different about the way Daniels looked at him now. A quiet, dangerous resolve. Will this experience become something more dangerous for Jason? Officer Parker finally decided it was time to speak to Jason after days of hearing complaints from fellow officers. One evening, when Jason came home, he found his father sitting in the living room with a serious expression. "Sit down, Jason," his father ordered. Jason, always full of confidence, plopped himself into the chair, prepared to dismiss whatever lecture was to come. But Officer Parker was not angry. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "You need to show respect," he said. "Not just to me or to the officers you see every day, but to everyone. You're not above the law, and you're certainly not above the people around you." Jason brushed it off as a joke. "Oh, come on, Dad. What's the big deal? They know who I am. No one's going to do anything." He brushed off his dad's warning, not having a clue about the depth of what was happening. He figured his dad was just wimping out, too cowardly to stand up to him. Is Jason's dad going to go that far to teach his son a lesson? Well, the very next day, everything changed. Jason was walking down the street, chatting with friends, when suddenly he was surrounded by officers. They grabbed him by the arms and pulled him toward a squad car. "What's going on?" Jason shouted, trying to break free. He was confused, scared. These were the very officers he'd insulted for weeks. Why were they arresting him? "This is a mistake," Jason protested, but no one was listening. They shoved him into the car, and within minutes he was in a cold, dark cell, his hands cuffed tightly. As the door slammed shut behind him, he could see his father standing outside the jail. Officer Parker didn't speak, didn't try to explain. He simply watched Jason through the bars, his face unreadable. Plot twist. Why did Jason's father allow this? What is his real motive? Jason sat in the small, dimly lit cell, the noise of the other prisoners echoing in his ears. The sounds of shouting, slamming doors, and clinking chains were nothing like he had ever imagined. He was used to being the one in control, the one who could get away with anything. But here, surrounded by strangers who had no reason to respect him, he felt powerless. His heart pounded in his chest. He realized he was alone. No one would come to save him. There were no privileges and no special treatment. He felt the fear creeping up his spine as he looked around the cold walls closing in on him. Will Jason survive in this world of darkness and danger? How will he react to just being another face in the system he used to despise? Days had passed, but for Jason, time seemed to stop. He never imagined it would be like this in prison. The walls were closing on him, and the cacophony of other inmates kept echoing in his mind how insignificant he had become. Without his father to protect him, he was just another inmate. Jason couldn't help but feel that everything he ever thought about himself was a lie. He was always the one in power, always the one getting away with everything. Here, among people who did not care who his father was, Jason began to feel small and weak. The arrogance that had filled him was gone, replaced by the weight of reality. He understood that without respect, power was empty. One morning, Jason sat on his bunk when the door to their cell creaked. He looked up, believing he would see one of the guards, but to his great surprise, it was his father, Officer Parker. When their eyes locked, he prepared himself for anger and a lecturing. This was his last chance to be punished anyway. But instead, Officer Parker's voice was calm, almost gentle. "This is for your own good," he said, his eyes fixed on Jason with an intensity that was almost quivering. Jason didn't understand. Why was his father calm? Why wasn't he upset? This wasn't the way Jason had expected him to react to this, and it only puzzled him more. His dad left, and Jason was sitting alone in his cell. He then starts replaying his mind, where the whole insults and disrespecting people happen. How all these acts he made earned him everybody's dislike toward him in life. Reminiscing the dad's career was long-lasting with sacrifices spent to just simply work hard so that it may have been an easier climb with some respect from many. That, on the whole, humbled Jason enough. He realized how much he had hurt his dad, how he had thrown away everything his father had worked for just because of his pride. And then the truth was very hard to hit upon him, that respect cannot be demanded but must be earned. The days became weeks, and inside prison, Jason started talking with the other inmates. He initially thought they were all mere criminals who didn't deserve his time. Then, however, as he listened to their stories, he started to see them in a different light altogether. He heard of the struggles and broken homes and the lopsided treatment they had. Jason realized that many of them weren't so different from him, all except that their choices had brought them down the wrong track. The more he listened, the more he understood. Old judgment started to get replaced by empathy. One night, everything changed. A riot broke out in the prison. Chaos filled the air, shouting, fighting, and slamming doors. Jason was flung into the middle of it. Panic started racing through his body. In the confusion, he got cornered by a bunch of inmates, and there was nowhere for him to run. However, things went from bad to worse before hope sprang out in the form of these officers, those very ones he had insulted months back. They were trying to break up the ruckus. Jason saw them reach out to him and yank him away from harm's path. At that moment, something crossed his mind that he never did before. Respect was not about authority, it was about trust. These officers, who had every reason to disregard him, were saving him at the very end. The riot subsided, and with it, Jason's term. The next morning, he was out of prison. He stepped out of the prison gates to see his father waiting there, silent as always. Jason did not need words for it. His father's silence was enough. Officer Parker had come not to punish him, but to know if Jason had indeed learned, and Jason had. He understood that everything his father had done was to help him grow not only as a man, but as someone who could gain respect on his own. Jason stood in front of his father as a changed man. He had come to learn that respect couldn't be demanded. It needed to be earned through actions rather than words. He went to the officers he had once disrespected and apologized, something he never thought he'd do. Officer Parker watched him, his eyes filled with quiet pride. Jason understood now. He could never regain his old confidence by relying on his father's name. His true strength came from within, from the respect he gave and received. Will Jason ever regain his old confidence, or has his journey changed him forever? Can he live up to his father's legacy not through power but through respect?